Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on equality, diversity, and inclusion. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this session. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Today, in today's session, we have I'll give you a bit of an overview about what equality, diversity, and inclusion means for the British Council. Um, and hopefully you will have a chance to understand it better in the context of the next discussions that will happen following following my opening remarks. British Council, as you know, is a cultural relations organization, and equality, diversity, and inclusion is at the very heart of our cultural relations mission. And through this, we want to be recognized as an inclusive organization, ensure that our programs and services and ways of working demonstrate our commitment to EDI, to help to be fair in all in all our engagements and work within and outside the organization, to help and to ensure that all our partners, clients, customers, colleagues, employees feel valued and respected, and to build on our skills in working across different cultures. And overall, we follow a mainstreaming approach, embedding EDI into every way in which we do our work. So this is the sort of EDI vision that the British Council has across the world, wherever we are operating. And so through this, you understand how important EDI is to the way that we do things. Our approach is basically a threefold one. Um, we believe that there is a very strong business case for EDI, that it's good for business, and it helps to nurture creativity, innovation, and flexibility, and will help us deliver our cultural relations work most effectively. There is a moral case. It is the right thing to do, to be, and wherein you value everyone, we are fair and respectful, encourages ways of working that are based on dignity, compassion, empathy, and mutual benefit, and it recognizes our shared humanity. And of course there is a legal case, as you know, our legal obligations in many of the countries where the British Council operates. Aspects of EDI are part of the legal environment, and we strive and we are committed to meeting our legal obligations. Um, so with this, like a very brief kind of an overview of what actually EDI stands for the British Council, I take this opportunity to once again welcome all of you, and I'm very pleased to share that we're going to have a number of eminent speakers who will be sharing, who will take you through various sessions. You have had a chance to look at the program, but let me take a few minutes to introduce to you our speakers. We have Priyanka Shetty, who is Senior Manager, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Pride Circle. She has over 15 years of experience as an experiential marketer and entrepreneur, really dealing with brands and people across industries and verticals. Priyanka, it led her to an organization that fueled her in passion to learn, practice, and eventually guide organizations in understanding what diversity, equity, and inclusion truly mean, not just for the organization, but for society at large. She has honed her skills in the space of LGBT plus inclusion and supports a large portfolio of clients in framing their LGBT plus inclusion roadmap. Her expertise lies in strategizing and curating social impact programs aligned to your organizational goals, end to end project management, customer relations, mentoring, and nurturing team members to become rock stars. And really, we could all do with a bit of rock in our lives in the current scenario. Um, our guest speaker today is Solo, a writer, illustrator, and creative director who loves telling stories that are queer and neurodivergent. As a journalist with the Times of India, Bangalore, and Scroll, they have written widely about queer art and popular culture. The art director for India's first queer graphic anthology, They work largely in the space of queer comics. They have also written a queer manga that was released in Japan, contributed to anthologies and more. Neurodiverse as well, Solo's works are often a reflection of the undeniable intersectionality. They are currently working on a full length graphic novel about growing up queer and neurodiverse in India. They have also led Vice Asia's collaboration project with Close Up LFA, which aim to celebrate love that is stigmatized through the continent. So we're really fortunate that such an eminent person has agreed to be our guest speaker for the session today, and really looking forward for their input. And last but certainly not the least, very happy to introduce our very own colleague, Hafiz Furqan Bashir, who is the regional head, South Asia head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion for the British Council. Furqan is a graduate of SZABIST in project management, and he has 12 years of experience in the development sector with a major focus on gender equality, education of children, and creating opportunities for the disabled. So, with this sort of brief introduction, I welcome you once again and hand you back to the moderator. Thank you so much, and wish you a very good and enriching session today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I don't think I could have done justice to myself the way you did. And welcome everybody. I'm so excited to be here today. My pronouns are she and her. And like Deepa mentioned, I work for an organization called Pride Circle that focuses on LGBT plus diversity and inclusion in the corporate space. And I'm looking forward to understanding how we can infuse the same within festivals and festival organizations. The next 60 minutes is split into 3 parts. We'll first go over the basics of LGBT+, what it stands for, what sojis means. We'll then move on to an understanding of the Indian landscape and the progress that's been made, and what steps organizations are taking towards LGBT+ inclusion, and how Pride Circle is helping them in fostering the culture of inclusion. We'll then have a group discussion, a very short group discussion. My only request is to keep this interactive. Like I said, we work mainly with corporate organizations, and I would like very much to also understand how festivals work and what we can collectively do to make your areas and spaces also LGBT plus inclusive. So please, let's keep that interactive. You're a small group, so please feel free to unmute and share your thoughts and your reflections. Is a fireside chat with Solo. Like Deepa has beautifully introduced them. Solo is an extremely talented writer, illustrator, and creative director who loves telling stories that are queer and neurodivergent. I also have the phenomenal fortune of calling her a colleague. Super. So over the next 60 minutes, I do want you to pay attention to your assumptions. First step towards inclusion. Understanding and acknowledging our biases is the first step towards truly being inclusive. Please know that this is a safe space. Please feel free to ask questions during the group discussion piece. There are no right or wrong, silly or basic questions. Any question is just a question, so just please ask. The session of the group discussion and the fireside chat is not being recorded, so it is a safe space. If you want to take notes, please keep a pen and paper ready, and you can just make sure you kind of ask your questions. And most importantly, I would like you to take one learning from this session and apply it the way you feel best in your internal circles and your organization. Super. I'm now going to begin with asking you a few questions. I want you to tell me whether it's a myth or a fact. Most of you, or probably all of you, are going to probably think that these are pretty silly and basic, but do keep in mind that these are actual statements that folks from the community have heard time and again, and probably do even now. Yeah. So cool. I mean, please unmute and answer if you want to, or you can always use the chat box and do so. Yeah, perfect. Okay, First one. As I read them out, you can think and tell me whether they're myths or facts, and I will give you the answers in the next question, although I'm sure all of us here are going to get the answers right. Yeah, first one. Homosexuality is a choice, lifestyle, preference, and is unnatural. Please tell me if it's a myth or a fact according to your understanding. I'm going to wait for a couple of seconds. I don't want to spend too much time here, but I do want all of you to unmute. This is going to be an interactive session, so please come on. You can tell me whether it's going to be a myth or what. What do you think? Is it a myth or a fact? Or you can use your chat box as well. I see there are some chats. Super. Okay. Yes, myth. Absolutely. All right. Are you sure? I mean, I'm sure all of us have had that neighborhood auntie who has said that's just a phase, or we've heard someone say very casually mention, that, oh, come on, that's just a lifestyle choice. Next one. Let's see. Okay. LGBT people are not normal. They're a creation of modern age. Any more myths or facts? Maybe it's a fact. Let's blame the Gen Z for everything, right? So what do you think? Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time. So any answers? Okay, I'm going to go on. Being around LGBT plus people endangers the well-being of children. Like common cold, being LGBT is also highly communicable. So what do you think? Is it a myth or a fact? Okay, myth. Super. All right. All LGBT people have HIV and AIDS. All, everybody has HIV and AIDS.
This is definitely a myth. All those are myth, but this is definitely a myth.
Definitely, right? Okay. No, there's no doubt there, no question whatsoever. All right. Okay. Homosexuality can be cured by psychotherapy or corrective therapy. Okay. Super. So I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to take it and I'm going to assume that everyone thinks the answer for that is also a myth. And you're right. Everything is a myth. That's right. And all these statements are myth. They are either stereotypes or falsities that have no basis in science whatsoever. And I'd like to point out a few statements specifically. One, homosexuality is not a choice. It's a perfectly naturally occurring variation of human sexuality. And in fact, homosexuality is prevalent in a lot of animal species as well. I mean, so many times we have heard people so casually say things like, oh, it's a choice, oh, there's just a phase, but it's not. Secondly, homosexuality is definitely not a Western phenomenon. I mean, come on, let's stop blaming the Gen Z and the West for everything. Yeah. References of homosexuality and how widely accepted it was in the Indian culture itself can be found in our ancient texts and sculptures. So all one has to do is read, Google, and then you get all the answers to that. And of course, since homosexuality is a naturally occurring phenomenon, there is nothing really to cure. In fact, and it's not a disease. So what are you going to cure? And in fact, the Indian Psychiatric Society has specifically stated that homosexuality is not a disorder, specifically in terms of conversion therapy. I mean, this statement was released in 2020. It's really late, but still, better late than never. In fact, as of last year, we had a high court of an Indian city kind of come up there and ban conversion therapy. As of last month, we had a country ban conversion therapy. And you have to wonder, right? We're in 2022 and we're still talking about banning conversion therapies. So it is a big win. We'll take whatever we are getting. So, yay to that. But it's about also changing mindsets. Let's now move on to what LGBT plus actually means. And what does the core acronym actually mean? Yeah. So here, LGBT plus or LGBTQ is an acronym that stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning. Now, there is a reason why it is designed in such a way where the LGB is on one side and T is on the other side, and queer is the umbrella. The terms, the LGB are sexual orientation terms or sexuality identities, whereas T is a gender identity term. Q or queer is actually an umbrella term where all sexual and gender minorities can be clubbed together. The terms queer and transgender are considered umbrella terms, which encompasses a whole range of identities. The community thought that, there would be an umbrella, it would be best if there's an umbrella term that would encompass all the sexual and gender minorities. And it would be great if we can have that one term that could be adopted, and that's called queer. Because nowadays, that there is an LGBTQIA plus S, and there's like a huge acronym. And so that's why they thought that, okay, if we can adopt one word that would kind of, mean the entire thing, it would be great. And queer was hence adopted. So each person defines queer differently, but a common thread to the definition is a person who's non-heteronormative, non-heterosexual, and or non-binary. Is that understood? This is what LGBT, and that's why we have kind of divided them into two different segments over here. I do want to now move into what sojis stands for. I may not have enough time to kind of jump and delve into every small piece of sojis, and I do, sincerely urge all of you to go out there and actually read the pieces, because there's a lot of information online, but I feel like, it would be incomplete if I do not touch upon what sojis means. So sojis stands for sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics. In order to understand the myriad of sexual and gender identities, it's helpful to break them down into separate categories. And as I explain the terms on the right-hand side, I would like you to also pay attention to the gender-bred person. This is the gender-bred person on the left-hand side. That will help you understand the terms better. The term gender-bred was coined by an author named Simon Killerman, and his website has some fantastic reading material. I hope all of you will take the time after the session to go and read about what the gender-bred person stands for and what sojis really means, because that will really give you an in-depth understanding of the LGBT plus community. So the fundamental of sojis lies in the understanding that sex and gender is not the same thing. I may not be able to cover the entire piece, but I do want to go through what this basically means. So the first thing is called sexual, so like I said, the fundamental of sojis lies in the understanding of sex and gender not being the same thing. The first one being sex characteristics, and also called biological sex. This is the category that, when we are asked to mark out in any government form or any application, that part that comes below first name, last name, date of birth, that is asked us for our sex. And we've got sub boxes that say male or female. Now, of course, there are people and companies who also include others or trans in it. And very often we have noticed that very casually people interchange that whole sex column with gender. And that is supremely incorrect. Because again, that stems from the lack of understanding that sex and gender is not the same thing. Now, on one hand, you see that, we have people who are assigned male at birth. And on the other hand, we have people who are assigned female at birth. Why I use the term assigned is that because there are 4 characteristics that determine a person's biological sex, which is A, genitals, B, chromosomes, C, gonads, and D, hormones. These are the 4 different elements that kind of determine a person's biological sex. And very, very rarely does a medical professional or the doctor who delivers the baby determines the sex of the baby after an in-depth medical analysis. Typically how people just kind of announce the sex of the child. Either it's a male or a female, or then we say intersex. Usually it's just a visual observation, and hence it's called assignment, because the assignment can be wrong, and in most cases or some cases it is. An intersex person is someone with neither male nor female sex characteristics, or a combination of both. Please bear in mind that there are more than these categories for these sex characteristics, because if you remember basic permutation and combination with the input of 4 characteristics, the results will naturally be more than just 2 or 3. So, but this is a very, very basic understanding for you folks to understand how gender and sex is not the same thing and what sojis really stands for. Now, similarly, there is also a lot of reading that you can do in terms of gender identity and expression and what sexual orientation means. I would definitely urge all of you to please go ahead and do that. I just spoke about the sex characteristics bit of it because I want you to understand the very basic fundamental about sex and gender not being the same thing. I hope that will give you more information and pique your curiosity to understand what gender identity and expression means and what the different spectrums of gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation also is. I will now quickly move on to the LGBT plus landscape and progress in India. Yeah. Before I go to the next slide, of course, of the session, towards the end of this 60 minutes, or during the the group discussion also. So please take down your questions, and we can always, kind of circle back and go over those questions during the group discussion or during the Q&A. Now, the next bit. So the LGBT plus people have had to face a very long and lengthy battle for equality, which is still going on, honestly. The biggest legal hurdle for companies basically was to engage with the LGBT plus inclusion was the IPC section 377, which criminalized same gender love. It was introduced in 1861 and read down only in 2018. Bear in mind, only in 2018 did homosexuality get decriminalized. However, there is a very, very, very long way to go for full LGBT plus acceptance, equality, and in issues in terms like marriages, inheritance, adoption, surrogacy, and lots more. That still remains. But then again, like I said, this was a very, very big win, because not only was it a win for the community, but it also opened up a lot of organizations to openly go and support the LGBT plus community. The Section 377 judgment made it easier for mainstream media also and the entertainment industry to talk about LGBT plus inclusion the issues that they face, and slowly we started seeing a lot of LGBT plus representation visibly, whether it was in terms of movies. Most recent was Badhai Do, that was released, which had Rajkumar Rao and Bhumi Pednekar play the lead roles, that spoke about lavender weddings, and what the LGBT plus community goes through. Similarly, we've had multiple movies, shown in the past, and the best part about it is, no more is the LGBT plus community used as a representation for comic relief. These are the representation here is done in a positive way. And with workforce and customers getting younger and younger, the millennials or the Gen Z have more exposure to it, and they're more and hence they relate better and more to the LGBT plus community via such mediums. All of this opened up doors for corporate India to start becoming more inclusive. So we can see that companies are now moving their feet on LGBT plus inclusion, be it via affirmative hiring, same-sex partner, healthcare insurance, transition coverage, policies. You have open Pride Month celebrations, even conducted by organizations. You have employee resource groups that really help people from the community who are, in the organization. And of course, there are a lot of inclusive policies that organizations are adopting too. I'm sure in the next segment, have inclusive policies, not just for LGBT, but for all the other pillars of diversity as well. In addition, companies and individuals have also started becoming more inclusive in their marketing and advertising campaigns as well. Here are a few examples done in the recent past. All of this has kind of mainstreamed a positive portrayal of LGBT plus individuals and has thereby resulted in an increased visibility and acceptance. Are we done? Are we done with representing and talking and fighting the fight for the LGBT plus community? No, certainly not. But it's a start. There's been great progress in the last few years, and there's a long way to go. But how? I now want to move on to the business case for organizations. Very often when we go to a lot of corporate organizations and talk about LGBT plus inclusion, a big question we get asked is why? Why should an organization partake in LGBT plus inclusion? Everything is going on as per, why should we even bother? We've done, we've met our revenues, we've done X amount of profit, we've got so many great people in our talent pool. So why should we even bother with something like LGBT plus inclusion or diversity and inclusion as a whole? I'll give you three main reasons why. So first, the future of work. 2/3 of the population today is Gen Y or Gen Z. That is not something that nobody is aware of. A study that was conducted by BCG, that's Boston Consulting Group, said that 80% of the workforce prefers to work for an organization that is openly inclusive. And by openly inclusive, I mean whether you've got your equal opportunity employer statements out there, whether you've got non-discrimination policy clearly mentioned in your job requisites that go out on your website, Do you have representatives from your organization who are openly going out there on forums and platforms and talking about how your organization is open? That is what openly inclusive means. So number two, to attract and retain. The same survey also highlighted that candidates are 7 times more likely to decline an offer that because they realize that companies are not inclusive, and 13 times more likely to quit if after joining the organization that they realize that the organization does not walk the talk. So, you know, a lot of times we feel and we are told that, you know, the LGBT community has had it hard. So for them, financial security, you know, tops the list. And while that is true, what they equally want, or probably in certain cases a little bit more, is safety, is respect, is dignity, is having a feeling of being heard, of being visible, of being appreciated. And if people who join, candidates who join your organization do not feel that, they will quit, they will leave. And of course, competitive advantage. You know, the global spends of the LGBT plus consumer is estimated to be USD 5 trillion per year. And 71% of that group chooses brands and companies that are visibly inclusive. Of course, you know, we also heard in the beginning of the session where Deepa spoke about how organizations are also moving towards inclusion, because it talks about, it increases creativity, inclusion, innovation. And of course, like any organization, it requires, they want top and bottom lines to kind of show that they have. So there is definitely a business case that organizations have to consider when they talk about LGBT plus inclusion or inclusion and diversity on the whole. So how do we create that impact? One very simple way to do that is to be able to include LGBT plus in the employee's life cycle. Studies have shown that the first 12 months of an employee at an organization plays a very crucial role in determining whether the candidate will retain their job and how far of an external advocate they'll become. Which is why it is important to integrate and infuse inclusion in each stage of an employee's life cycle. Now, I understand this might seem like it is more towards, it kind of, you know, talks about an corporate organization's employee life cycle, but I'm sure you can use this particular method and this particular model in whichever organization or whichever industry you fall under. The reason it benefits an organization to take this approach is because you imbibe inclusion with an intention. It is very important to make these statements to kind of create your roadmap on inclusion with an intention. Having an EOE, which is an equal opportunity employer statement or a non-discrimination policy, will probably help you in attracting and recruiting diverse workforce and help you check that diversity box. But what happens once the employee begins to work? And this is where organizations and programs that they curate come armed with necessary knowledge. Organizations and programs that they curate, like Pride Circle, come armed with necessary knowledge. They play a very crucial role in helping organizations design your way forward in your inclusion journey. I'm going to take you through a few of the programs that Pride Circle has curated for their partner organizations, which will give you an understanding as to what you can probably imbibe in your certain organizations and in your communities as well. The first one being RISE. Now, RISE is reimagining inclusion for social equity. The RISE has 2 different formats to it. We've got the job fair and we've got a conference. The RISE job fair provides a platform for organizations who are committed, of organizations who feel like, you know, who understand that, okay, you know, the first step towards diversity is inclusion, is getting in that diverse workforce. And that is where programs like the job fair, like RISE job fair, or many other event-based programs, or even offline hiring organizations like Pride Circle can help and support companies like yours in making sure you hire from diverse communities. And in this, and the conference also provides organizations with a platform to network with other thought leaders, external advocacy for your commitment to LGBT plus inclusion, and focused branding. Like I mentioned, you know, so it's fantastic if you make sure you take all the right steps in getting and making sure your company and your organization is diverse and is inclusive. But if you don't go out there and let the actual target audience know that you are an inclusive organization, then you're kind of losing out on that kind of talent pool. Over the last 3 editions, we have managed to successfully place over 350 candidates just through the RISE job fair and close to 500 through our other event-based hiring programs and offline hiring models as well. Of course, it doesn't just stop here. I read somewhere that diversity without inclusion is like a revolving door. People will join your organization, they'll realize that they're actually not being made to feel inclusive or heard, they'll get disenfranchised and they will leave. The solution is to make sure that necessary steps are taken, not just for that individual, but also to educate and inform the rest of the organization of LGBT plus inclusion. And we can do that by conducting various different programs for people in the organization, for the employees, and for your partners as well. Some couple of very simple steps for you to do that is conducting various sensitization and training programs for employees. You can conduct speaker sessions with members of the community through fireside chats, like what we probably have in the next segment with Solo, have panel discussions, invite allies to share their experience. It is very important for your employees to hear lived experiences from people of the community and allies alike, for them to understand how they can foster a culture of inclusion as individuals and as an organization as whole. You can take them through multiple various sensitization sessions and training programs, but the kind of knowledge they get and the kind of insight they get by listening to somebody from the community is exponential, because then you kind of create that emotional bond also, which you probably will not get just through sensitization and the training workshops. All of this goes towards creating a safe space for your employees where they feel heard and valued. It also is very important to educate your employees to be able to create that safe space for people from the diverse groups that you have hired into your organization. Another area that I want to concentrate on is supplier diversity. And this I feel would also, a lot of you from the festival organization space would also relate to, because you, of course, while your core teams might be small, you deal with a lot of people outside to be able to get your festivals up and running. Now, Rainbow Bazaar, what started as a day-long in-person bazaar for LGBT plus entrepreneurs called the Marketplace, which took place in Bangalore and Delhi in the years of 2019 and 2020, has now become an online marketplace called the Rainbow Bazaar. It's a unique, one-of-a-kind online e-market platform for micro and small LGBT plus owned businesses in India. So along with individual buyers, what we have seen is a lot of corporate organizations also taking affirmative steps to infuse supplier diversity and reach out to LGBT plus owned businesses via Rainbow Bazaar. It's very easy for us to, just say that, okay, Amazon is really very easy for us to get, what we want, X, Y, Z. So let me just go on to that. All it will take is for you to take a step back and just feel like, okay, the same thing is probably available through an LGBT plus vendor. So why not just go there and buy the same product? Because what you don't realize is not only are you imbibing and kind of subconsciously making yourself and as an individual be more inclusive, but you're also fueling the LGBT plus economy, which is really, really important so that people get the kind of financial and economic independence that they're striving for. The last piece of this is, is being able to take certain steps to measure the actions that you have taken. While taking necessary steps is imperative, what is equally important is to regularly monitor and evaluate those actions. And that is why something called IV comes into play, which is India Workplace Equality Index. The next steps, so that you know that the steps that you're taking and the actions that you're taking are actually beneficial in making a real difference. Internally, you can undertake surveys within your employees to make sure that they themselves feel included, that they themselves feel heard. And externally, you can also take part in indexes that will give you an understanding of the progress that as an organization you're making, the gaps, and where future work needs to be undertaken. One very important thing to remember is that inclusion of any kind, I'm not talking about just LGBT plus inclusion, but inclusion of any of the diverse pillars is a continuous progress. It's a process of continuously driving initiatives, having conversations, measuring, evaluating, and repeating that cycle all over again. Another important thing that I want all of you to remember is that you can't expect to see results on the get-go, because then you're just going to be setting yourself up for disappointment. Keep in mind that this takes time and patience is the key. Before I end, I want all of you to take a pledge. Um, uh, Being an ally is more than just having knowledge and being aware of the LGBT plus issues. Allyship is also about to your colleagues, to your partners, to your external vendors, and everybody who plays an important role in your ecosystem. So let's take that role to come out as an ally, if that's what you identify as, and speak up whenever possible and needed, and join in as much as possible. With this, I come to an end of my presentation. I would like the organizers to maybe share the group discussion space, and we can then probably take in questions that we can have, based on the presentation that was just shared, or we can go over the questions that we've got as part of the group discussion and go forward from that.
Okay, thank you so very much, colleagues, for joining us today. We will be talking about how to design an effective diversity and inclusion strategy. There are three key points which I will be covering in today's session: the role of leadership, how to effectively plan, and how some strategies are not designed as achievable, and they are designed as very ambitious strategies which are not achievable in longer run and even in shorter run too. So let's start with the leadership point. What my observation is while working in the development sector from last 14 years is that until and unless your leadership is not committed, you are not going to design a strategy which is working well. And why it is because most of the strategies, in fact, all of the strategies depend on accountability. And when you don't have leadership who is owning that strategy from the top, then you have a problem. Leadership plays a key role in identifying which areas they would like to focus. Also, if they are owning one of the areas, teams will make sure that their leaders' objective, which is impacting their performance, is met. So that is a challenge within our organizations, that leadership level is not very engaged. What we are trying to do is to operationalize things. And in operationalizing, we work at a very bottom level of the organization, where we have one or two people saying that, yes, this is the EDI or diversity and inclusion strategy, and we would like to achieve it. They do not have usually any kind of support from their line managers while doing diversity and inclusion work, or from their senior leadership teams to do the EDI work within the organization. For those of you who do not understand this phrase EDI, that means equality, diversity, and inclusion, which we use here at the British Council for our diversity and inclusion work, which we are doing across the globe. So whenever I'm saying EDI, that means diversity and inclusion work, which we are doing within the British Council. And as we are talking about festivals organization, so I have contextualized it, but I will be covering it in the next portion, where I will be speaking about specific strategies. I talked about leadership commitment, and another point which I would like to state here is how diversity and inclusion work is recognized across the organization. Leaders within the organization should take small but meaningful steps to recognize the work done in diversity and inclusion space. EDI is not usually considered as a factor in your performance evaluation. So this is again the responsibility of leaders to help people to address this challenge within the organizations. Second, when we specifically talk about designing of the EDI strategy, what we usually do, we do not plan effectively. And planning is one key thing which is at the core of designing diversity and inclusion strategies. We need to calculate our resources effectively. When we are designing our resources, we need to make sure that human and financial resources, which we are planning in the EDI strategy, are there. If they are not there, we are planning those resources to be included in the strategy, which we will be achieving over next couple of years. What happens most of the times is that while planning resources, there is not adequate focus which is put on the tasks which we are planning to do and the resources which we are going to allocate. So most of the times it becomes a problem of achievability, which I will discuss later. But when you don't have adequate resources dedicated for EDI and the work which you are planning to deliver across the organization over next few years, then I'm afraid to say that you are planned to fail, a phrase which we use in project management language. The next point, which I touched upon earlier, is around achievability. And achievability is quite important. As you know that the objectives which we are setting for our strategies should be smart objectives. They should be achievable, they should be measurable and time-bound, and they should be very specific. Often we have seen that when we are working in the diversity and inclusion space, there are passionate volunteers who are doing this work. And when they are designing strategies, they are designing them in such a way where they commit a lot and they don't have physical, financial, and human resources to support that strategy. This problem leads to failed implementation, which ultimately puts the morale down of those who are leading and those who are supporting them in capacity of sponsor. So these things really help us to focus on the key things which are really necessary to have an efficient and effective strategy in place. Last point, which I would like to say in terms of achievability, is we plan on those initiatives which are really big ones. And let's suppose an initiative can be completed in 5 years. We are very ambitious and we would like to achieve that objective in 3 years. I'd like to quote from our global head of diversity and inclusion that EDI is a journey. We always learn new things. We learn from each other. And when we are on a journey, that journey cannot be shortened. In fact, we are always learning and incorporating new things. So diversity strategies are not usually as they are planned. There are changes to them when we are in the implementation phase as per the context, as per the need of the environment. So in British Council, we have 6 areas which we focus and by saying these 6 areas, we do not say that these are the only areas which needed to be focused, but this is and these are the areas of focus for the British Council, and those are age, disability, race/ethnicity, gender, religion and belief, and sexual identity. So these are 6 areas which we focus. We have guides developed on most of the areas, including disability, gender, sexual identity, and religion and belief. We are in the process of developing guides for rest of the areas. which guides, these guides really help our internal and external stakeholders to really move forward. In addition to that, we have business model and legal case as part of our diversity strategy. And these three strands basically guide us to move forward in this EDI space. We always try to actually prepare a business case, a model case, and a legal case against all of these six EDI dimensions which we have here in the British Council. We follow the UK Equality Act and as a baseline document for our equality policy, and our equality policy, which is there, governs how we operate in this space along with our diversity strategy. In terms of the next segment, which is, or next part, I would say, which is around monitoring and measuring the performance. There are specific tools which we have here in the British Council to measure our performance in the area of equality, diversity, and inclusion. The first one is diversity assessment framework, and that is an annual submission. This year, this submission will be happening on 19th of May. 19th of May is the deadline for that. This is a bespoke tool developed by our diversity unit based in the UK. All our operations are required to submit diversity assessment framework usually, but considering the context, sometimes we make it optional just because we would like to have a culture where we are saying that diversity and inclusion should be embedded in everything what we do. Sometimes we take an approach where we recommend every operation to submit. Sometimes we do it as an option to balance the approach. There are several other tools which are there, and one of the tools which is Guide to Mainstreaming for Projects and Programs is used to evaluate planning inclusivity of development phase and delivery phases of the project. Similarly, there are other tools, including questions tool, which is there to assess how inclusive our individual events are, how well we have thought about disability, gender, religion and belief, socioeconomic classes, and others. So these are measuring tools, and in terms of evaluation, we have leaders who have set objectives related to diversity and inclusion, and they are measured as their end of year performance. One overarching area which I missed, which is there in our diversity strategy along with those 6 areas, is socioeconomic classes. This is introduced in our refreshed EDI strategy within 2020. And now we see socioeconomic classes as an overarching area where we are thinking about age, we are thinking about socioeconomic classes. And again, in terms of intersectionality, these areas are interlinked with each other. When we are thinking about one area, we are considering other areas. And we also appreciate that there are other factors and there are other things which shape experience of individuals and which shape personality and overall persona of an individual and part of their personality and personal lives. Thank you. So this is all which I wanted to say in terms of designing EDI strategies and how to, and the role of leadership, how we can plan things, and in terms of achievability, what are some of the key issues which are there. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll now move into breakout rooms for the next part of our session, and I'll discuss the topics shortly.
Who are interested in actively learning about equality, diversity, and inclusion and how they can bring this about in their own spaces of work. So thank you for taking the time to join us today for this workshop. Please give us your feedback. The team will have pasted a link in chat that you can click on and fill out. This will also be sent around on email if that's easier to access. This session has been made possible by the British Council under their umbrella project, Festivals for the Future. This is part of the Festival Connections series of industry-facing conversations and workshops for the cultural festival sector. Thank you to my team at ArtX Company and Arts and Culture Resources India, Alekha and Mahima, who are with us in this session, and Vidushi, Shreya, and Rashmi, who are outside of this, and for putting this entire session together and running it so smoothly. The next Festival Connections workshop will take place on 21st April, which focuses on restructuring financial strategies for festivals. The link to the RSVP form will also be available in this chat box, and hopefully we will see you there. And if you'll watch your screens for just a few more minutes, we'd like to tell you about a platform that's being created to support the cultural festival sector. It's called Festivals from India, also supported and being made possible by the British Council. It's set to launch in a few weeks, so I do hope you'll stay to find out a little bit more about it. It's a short video. We will end this session once the video completes playing. So this is us saying thank you very much for being part of this session, this workshop. Thanks again to our speakers. And hopefully next time we will see you at an actual festival.